I will be ranting on about for Gary, an episode from SpongeBob SquarePants. Enjoy. Let me tell you reasons why this episode is really feral. For starters, it is rather an original, and it hinges around the overused glitch, where the innocent character gets punished despite committing no wrongdoings, whereas the one or ones who did do the wrongdoings get or gets away scot-free, while not the case with the villain. Not only is it beaten into the ground by this point, but it's always been mean-spirited and never pleasant to watch. Needless to say, this episode is no exception. It is also infamous for being solely made to put Gary, who actually tell. Not only have they used the glitch for really horrible attempts at comedy, but they do the sinful act of depicting SpongeBob as being so overly oblivious to everything that was happening around him, which is going to be explained below as you listen. As usual, SpongeBob is a complete idiot and his flanderization has gone too far. In fact, he is at his absolute worst here. This is evident when he intends to get a pal for Gary, because he felt upset that the latter is all alone, even though Gary has always been doing fine and has never minded being alone. He finds a pet store with new branches owned by a merchant, at which he ignores her warning about Puffy Fluffy and steals him without paying. He sends Gary to bed, as he thinks the latter was ignoring Puffy Fluffy, even though Puffy Fluffy is clearly acting psychopathic towards Gary. He assumes Gary to have destroyed his library and almost his whole house, which is nonsensical, as it would be impossible for a normal pet to destroy a house in a single night. Instead of being scared of him, SpongeBob thinks Puffy Fluffy's monster form is one of Puffy Fluffy's friends. In the most infamous, controversial and infuriating scene of the episode, he gratingly scolds Gary and tells him to put Puffy Fluffy down, when Gary was clearly being held captive inside Puffy Fluffy's mouth, and this was right in front of SpongeBob. Yes, SpongeBob has always been portrayed as mad from time to time, but never too stupid to realize that one of his pets is eating the other. Even Patrick, especially in seasons 6 to 7, isn't that dumb. Granted, this could be considered dark humor, and as such, it can be considered funny if it was in an adult show like Family Guy or Simpsons, not a kid show like SpongeBob SquarePants. When Puffy Fluffy runs away, SpongeBob calls for him to come back, despite the fact that the former had held him captive. Even at the end, he still blames Gary, despite how the latter had saved his life and prevented him from being devoured by Puffy Fluffy. He takes Gary to work, even though the Krusty Krab already made a policy banning pets earlier in the episode, which is straight up hypocritical. Despite in prior episodes that SpongeBob can clearly communicate with Gary and know his feelings, here, he completely ignores Gary's personal space and assumes that he is helpless. Generic story where the property of their owner is jealous of the new one, except it's taken to a direction of so low that it's already become horrible. Puffy Fluffy does nothing other than terrorizing Gary. That's what his character is. The scene where Puffy Fluffy puts one of his tongue in SpongeBob's mouth is disgusting. Puffy Fluffy's vicious design with long, jagged teeth and multiple sarlacc-like tongues is very disturbing, nightmarish, grotesque, and looks more like something out of a rejected Johnny Quest episode, especially for an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, although it does fit well with the solid tone about how the original must face the chaotic new pet, but still. Terrible ending. After Puffy Fluffy runs away when Gary rescues SpongeBob, SpongeBob acts ungrateful towards Gary and still blames him by telling him, "What do you have to say for yourself?" instead of apologizing or being grateful to Gary for saving his life. And after all that, he takes Gary everywhere he goes, especially the Krusty Krab. Not helping is that Mr. Krabs uses Gary as free labor, even though he created a policy banning pets from the Krusty Krab. The ending also thinks that SpongeBob giving Gary a job is a very happy and funny ending, but it's actually a very upsetting, dumb, and an unfair ending when you think about it. but it is obviously unlikely that Gary's situation is permanent, and the show is a loose string, as they always have been, since later episodes shows Gary being in SpongeBob's house, while the latter's at work. But still, this is just too much for a character like Gary. SpongeBob never gets punished for how he acted to Gary, other than almost getting eaten by Puffy Fluffy, but it isn't enough. Wasted potential, the idea of an episode where the protagonist finds an animal that looks harmless when, in truth, it's a dangerous creature, was a neat idea of a SpongeBob episode, and could have made some creative and funny gags that involves the creature, but Gary had to be put, point, which ruins the episode greatly. The saleswoman of the nudie branches has sagging boobs, which is rather inappropriate in a kids show. That's all I have to say. Bye for now.